Before we begin, I just want to say that although I am a fan of the Amazing Digital Circus, that is not why I decided to do this commentary. It was because the arguments being made were rather bad. I do want to note this title, though, the Not-So-Amazing Digital Circus. You see, it's clever because the thing he's reviewing is the Amazing Digital Circus. However, by saying it's the Not-So-Amazing Digital Circus, he is also stealthily implying he personally does not view the product as amazing.
So I didn't care for Digital Circus.
Move this man!
Can I just talk about how much I hate this method of opening videos? You know, where somebody states an unpopular opinion and then says something to make it clear they're expecting a large backlash for it. It does nothing more than make any potential critics look like mindless fanboys who are just upset you didn't like a thing they liked. It's very poisoning the well-esque. Even though said people haven't even made a statement yet, given you haven't said the thing they'd respond to, so they aren't even really there for you to poison the well against them.
Yeah. Have fun roasting me in the comments. I'm sure I deserve it. But as the lone hater island in a sea of praise,
I mean, 57,214 people felt the need to leave a dislike on the upload of the pilot at time of recording, so you don't seem particularly alone, if I'm being honest. Don't get me wrong, it's certainly an unpopular opinion, given how well received this pilot was, but it's far from one only held by you specifically. Fuck, the day after Sarcastic Chorus's video came out, Cartoonshi uploaded a video pointing out how the show had already generated an abnormally large hate-dom. Anyway, Sarcastic Chorus basically summarizes the points he's going to make, which I'll just address when they appear later in the video, and then spends around 6 minutes going over all the things he liked about this pilot. And look, I'm not going to say you can't make positive points in a negative review. That would be ridiculous. However, I am going to say that you shouldn't be spending 6 minutes straight making them, especially if you advertised your video as a negative review. After all, I came here to see why this person did not think the pilot was amazing. So spending so much time focusing on the positives, especially at the start of your video before you've delivered any criticisms, is just bad structuring on your part.
let's get to my issues. And let's start with a big one that makes the most sense before I steadily get more and more pedantic. This show has been described as I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream with the aesthetic of an I Spy book. Two books that I actually love, and I can see myself adoring this show. But from just the pilot, I was left thinking that it is just okay. It's a great concept with all right execution and a lot of great polish, with the biggest source of discontent for me being how I never really buy into like the psychological horror of just being here.
What did any of that mean?
Like it's there. It's trying. My god, is it trying. But the phrase that comes to mind when I'm trying to describe these moments, for me, is performative existentialism. This show is great at planting little things to unsettle you, but every time it goes for the big swing, it always feels like a bit.
We stay right here, where I can keep my hundreds of all-seeing eyes on you.
I know this is a dark comedy, but every time it tries something like this, the vibe it gives off is... Ooh, implications!
You mean the same implications you just said the show was really good at?
Ooh, liminal horror!
I mean, yeah, that is what the show is going for in that scene. You certainly pointed that out in a silly voice. Look, I'm going to be blunt. I'm not even sure what Sarcastic Chorus's point is here, and I've listened to this part maybe 5 times. His complaint about these characters being performative, I assume, was attempting to communicate that he felt the characters were acting disproportional to the situation they were in. However, now he's saying the show puts too much emphasis on the issues with the setting, to the point where I guess it doesn't come off as subtle. At least that's what I'm getting. I'm honestly not entirely sure because he communicates this argument so poorly.
Like, I feel like I'm laughing at it rather than with it here. The show wants to press upon us so badly what a horrific existence it would be to be trapped in this world. But for me, I'm kind of just sitting here thinking about how unserious this feels. As yeah, it's a terrible situation. I kind of figured that out in the first 3 minutes. Nobody's handling it well here, but between the moments of horror that are beat for beat the exact moment you'd expect, slow zooms in as their mind breaks from the realization only to pull back with a joke, not to mention a hallway exit scene that feels like it is on its knees praying, begging, desperately asking for you to ask questions about what's going on. What's that computer mean? What's CNA? What's the spoiler? What the fuck is in the cellar? It takes me out. I don't hate it, but my honest takeaway is, oh, look how hard it's trying.
You see, this is another point that I kind of get what he means, and I don't mean I agree with it partially. I mean I kind of understand what he's trying to communicate, except not really. You complain that they're trying to scare you, I think, but why is that a bad thing, especially for a horror comedy product? Would you prefer it if they weren't trying and instead giving the impression they weren't putting effort into the end result? Or do you mean it lacks subtlety? And I should also note, you saying they're trying too hard, I think, also totally contradicts your complaint that it's basically doing the obvious actions for this situation, given that would be a hallmark of laziness, not extra effort. None of this makes any fucking sense.
Which is just so condescending on my part. But I am struggling to explain why I just feel so detached. This just keeps me from engaging with the story on its level and what it's trying to do. I think part of my unseriousness is that within this pilot, I struggle to have any sense of danger.
Well, that's probably because the pilot isn't meant to give you a sense of danger. It's meant to give you a sense of feeling trapped. It's introducing you to this isolated setting where the main horror comes from being transported to this place and not even remembering who you are.
There's fun slapstick to it, but I kind of struggled to register any of this as a threat. As in the moment, but especially in hindsight, the story just keeps taking me out of it and just showing there's not much threat here. And that just leaves the lukewarm comedy.
You know, direct danger is not the only way a horror story can have, well, horror. Psychological horror does exist, and that's clearly what the show was going for in the pilot. It's the setting itself that's supposed to create horror, not anything that happens in the setting, if that makes sense.
As you realize that the only real danger for these characters is the abstraction, as giving up and going insane. The abstraction beat the hell out of Rackety, but despite a royal ass whooping and glitching out, which does seem painful, but it's kinda unclear if the abstraction can actually kill them, as we never see an abstraction destroy an NPC or glitch out something to an unrecognizable state or absorb it into itself. Instead, it just looks like it hurts.
You do know physical pain is still a form of danger, right? This is yet another critique I just don't fucking get.
Kane can snap his fingers and fix them physically, so really this brings back the focus on the character's mental state. that the only way for these characters to go is for their minds to break, to give up, and for them to forget who they are as they lose all sense of themselves, devolving into these frustrating monstrosities that can only lash out. So unless that aspect is dug more into, and we watch someone start to slip and for it not to be done with a wink, the threat isn't there to actually get me to care.
So the threat isn't there unless it's done? Do you not know what a threat is?
So if I don't find it uproariously funny, and the psychological horror is just then all I have left is the intrigue of what's gonna happen to these characters, and the associated nightmare feel that comes along with it, which I'm unsure of how much they're actually gonna delve into these characters, and which part of them is just gonna be chalked up to a joke. It's really just all possibilities at this point.
I mean, you'd think this is a first episode dedicated to setting up the rest of the series or something.
This pre-K McPlay Place oversaturated visual vomit kinda drives me insane. Like, they really did a good job designing this place. It's that perfect I Spy kid show environment that's meant to look friendly, but only makes you feel crazier sitting there. But for me, the problem comes from the fact that I find it really distracting half the time. There's so much going on in this background. There's so many colors, so many things going different ways. I feel like the show half the time doesn't do enough to bring focus back to what I'm supposed to be looking at.
Okay, this is a complaint I somewhat get, however the clips that he shows to back it up, to be blunt, don't actually do a good job demonstrating this. Take this clip with the abstraction. Obviously, it's what you're supposed to focus on, not only because it's the only thing on screen that isn't bright, and therefore it ironically stands out more, but also because it's moving much more than anything else on screen. Therefore, your eye is naturally drawn to it. And during this shot, also shown in that segment, by the way, it's incredibly obvious you're supposed to be looking at Pompey because, to be blunt, what else is there to look at?
My uneducated guess is that the lack of detail in intentionally bright colors make it so that the soft blur that they do to delineate what's in the foreground and the background doesn't do enough. As instead, it kind of still looks like it's in focus even when it's actually not, meaning that all these wide shots feel like that they have way too much going on.
I mean, given the entire point of wide shots is to show a lot of space in one single shot, I don't really see how that would be a problem. I mean, yeah, it could be communicating a lot, but that's the entire point.
Which is something I can also say about Kane's design.
Move this man!
You already used that clip, and it makes even less sense here, honestly, because at least when you used it in reference to saying you had a distaste for certain aspects of the pilot more generally, I at least understood the show had gotten a large enough fan base to where some people might mindlessly dislike you for that. However, are there really big fans of Kane's design who will irrationally hate you for criticizing it? Is that a thing? Can you show me some evidence for this? I'm very confused.
Okay, now the real hill I'm about to die on, for basically no reason. But for as fun as the eyes and the mouth look is, I often found it more distracting than anything else. Yeah, some real artistry went into making these teeth emote. Yeah, put it all in the comments, I won't read any of them. But for me, years of masking has set me up to make just way too much eye contact. So when Kane's on screen, I always feel like I have to be focusing on the eyes. But since he's talking most of the time, and yeah, he is probably, he's not my least favorite character, I do feel like he's the one whose comedy and just bit misses the most for me. Half of that is intentional, but he is the one character I'm like, okay, this is more cringe than cute. But when he's talking most of the time and I'm staring at those eyes, what I'm focusing on is interrupted by his teeth moving around and just getting in the way of my point of focus. So I pull back to watch the teeth actually say the thing, only for that to lead me to drift back towards the eyes again, and rinse and repeat. I feel like I never know what I'm supposed to be looking at with this guy other than the nebulous everything.
That's kind of the point, though. Cain was designed like that in order to communicate that this is a world run by him, remember, which is rather different than the one we are used to inhabiting. Therefore, we're going to see the strange and odd, if only because the person who designs this world and rules it, to our knowledge at least, is himself very strange and odd by our standards. What you said isn't even really a criticism of the show, it's just what it's communicating to you. You describing that back to your audience means the show has communicated this with you successfully. Which seems like a good thing if I'm being honest. And don't get me wrong, it's okay if you dislike the design for other reasons. However, you are criticizing it for essentially fulfilling its intended purpose.
Cain feels like he was a really fun character to animate, but this iMouth situation is my personal hell, and it feels a little bit like I'm watching anime with subtitles. We're at a point I'm not really watching what's going on, but I am, but I'm not, since my focus is constantly being split.
Again, you're supposed to be in a new confusing world. I really don't see the complaint here. Anyway, that's all I want to cover, so final thoughts? I have no idea what he was trying to communicate with most of what was said in this video. Good night and good luck.